Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for tuning in to Health Leaders, the place for peer-sourced and solution-focused insights for healthcare executives. My name is G. Hatfield, and I'm the CNO editor for Health Leaders. Today, we are speaking with Deana Sievert, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Nursing Officer at Rush University System for Health and Rush University Medical Center, about her career and her thoughts about trends in the nursing industry. So, hi, Deana, how are you?
I'm good, G. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's great to see you again, and congratulations on your new role.
Thank you.
Um, of course, yeah. So we've spoken before, but today I really want to dive into your career in nursing. So right off the top, how did you begin your journey into nursing?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I had never, when I was in high school trying to figure out what I was going to be when I grew up, I never had really thought about nursing. I had thought a little bit about medicine, and so I had kind of thought maybe I was going to head down that pathway. And then I hit organic chemistry, and that
Mm.
quickly fizzled out. And so,
Completely
and
understandable.
I know, right? So fortunately for me, one of my high school friends, her mom was a nurse. And so, I had gotten connected with her and she kind of started sharing with me a lot of the benefits of nursing. She definitely qualified it with it's a tough profession. It's hard work, but it's very rewarding. And so, as I kind of sat and talked with her, she really kind of mentored me to think a little bit about nursing and what that might be for me. And so that's really kind of how I ended up going on to nursing school. From there, I was very fortunate. I was one of those people, which is commonplace now, but back when I graduated, it wasn't, where I was actually a new grad that got to be hired directly into an ICU. I was right at that point where that whole trend had shifted from you had to pay your dues out on med surge. And, I had done my last semester of school in the intensive care unit. And so that really opened the door for me. And so I was able to, really kind of lean into the ICU. I loved that. That was, I still talk about how that's probably still the favorite part of my career was being that bedside nurse and taking care of that. But I found I had strengths in other areas, and so I ended up taking a leadership role on a unit, and that just quickly grew over the last decade into where I am today. And so, just have had lots of opportunity, lots of doors. I always tell people when I'm talking with them about my career, don't ever avoid picking up the phone call because that's honestly how many of these opportunities came to me was by people coming and saying, "Hey, we think you'd be great for this. Would you like to try?" And so that's really how I ended up here today. And I don't regret any of that. It's been a lot of fun and a really great journey. Of course, ups and downs every day, but I think that comes with any job in any profession.
Absolutely. And that's a great mindset to have, especially at the beginning of your career, is just saying yes to things because you never know
Yeah,
where it's going to take you.
right.
Absolutely. So who've been some of your biggest influences in your career?
Yeah, so I really spent some time thinking about this, and I thought I'd start with, I think we've all had, leaders in our lives. And I'm sure that there have been, as we've all moved into leadership, there have been those people that you've looked at and you're like, wow, I want to be like that person, where they're just maybe charismatic and able to connect with team members and then you have the ones where you're like, wow, I don't ever want to act like that. And
Yes, yeah.
so, I think you can learn valuable lessons from both sides of that coin, right? And that's definitely been my case. As I've kind of spent my 35 years in nursing, I've had these people that I have really just connected with and enjoyed. And then, I've also had those ones who taught me how not to approach staff, how not to approach situations, how not to get into some of the situations that I think we do as leaders. And so I think those have been valuable lessons. I would say, though, in my leadership career, I've probably gravitated to two people. I think the first one, everybody knows, I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan. As soon as I see something comes out from him, I'm there. And, I have always just found his approach. I love how just genuine and authentic he is. And I love that he gives us permission as leaders to be the same way. I love that, he comes from that place of employees over, profits and that. And of course, that's hard to do in healthcare, and it doesn't always work like that. But I think it's a great aspiration. And I think if you're aspiring to that, it can help you. And so he's been a huge one. And then the other person that's kind of more in the nursing lane has been Dr. Bernadette Melnick. I love evidence-based practice. I think it is a key to the success of us as nurses. And, she was the dean at Ohio State when I was at Ohio State, but I knew her before I went to Ohio State. And, she is just a wonderful mentor when it comes to evidence-based practice about, thinking big and, just really, I've seen her just build her vision and then actually execute and accomplish it. And that has been just such an amazing, just an amazing benefit for me to be able to sit and watch her and the work that she has done. And so those are probably the two for leadership that I would give you, and where I get a lot of my information from.
Mhm. Absolutely. So, to get a little bit more deep in the conversation, what was your best mistake and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity now to work at several organizations, and a couple have been where I've shifted while I've been in leadership roles. And I think as I've reflected over the last decade of my career, and I remember this vividly, and I remember, after I kind of got into the situation, I was like, wow, I really didn't manage that very well, and but I've learned so much from the mistake. And I think that that's definitely an important message. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, because you can always find ways to recover from it, and you can always find ways to go back and repair it. But the lessons that you learn are always so valuable. So the mistake that I made, G, was that I was coming into a new organization. I was a leader, um, and had been an accomplished leader before I moved into the newer organization. And I think I really, when I came in, I didn't take the time to spend on what the cultural norms of that organization were. And I
Mm,
didn't take the time to investigate what are the unwritten rules, those things that you're not really oriented to, but you should know to avoid the political landmines, to avoid, damaging relationships, and all of that. And unfortunately, I didn't do that very well in one of my transitions, and it cost me as a leader. When I first moved into that organization, and I was just popping along and doing my job, unfortunately, it fractured some relationships along the way because I hadn't taken that time to navigate those things. And I
mhm,
think it's so important. I mean, we always talk about how important culture is, and we always talk about how it can make or break any type of a strategy that you have. And I think that was something I kind of took my eye off of, and it really did impact me in at that time. But of course, what it did then is it just set me back, a little ways. I had to really then go back, rebuild those relationships, repair some of the unintentional damage that had been done, and we got that all fixed and repaired, and life was okay then. But going when I think about that, and when I reflected on the question, that was what I really recalled was, I lost a lot of time. by having to go back and repair that. And so that was probably, the biggest mistake that I've made in my career, but it was also a powerful one. And it gave me a whole new appreciation, and lessons that I brought forward as I came here to Rush 3 months ago. And so definitely I'm taking the time to do those investigations and make sure that I'm not making that same mistake again.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's the most important thing is to learn from it.
Mhm.
So yeah, absolutely. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges currently facing CNOs and CNEs?
Yeah, there's so much right now. I mean, I've been in a chief nursing officer, nurse executive role now for a good 12 to 14 years. I lose track of time, but and it's changing so fast now. And it's just really there are a lot of balls in the air right now for I think CNOs and CNEs, and they're all critical and they're all, very powerful ones that we have to pay attention to. I think right now, the healthcare climate, with all of the changes that are happening at the federal level, at the state level, it's just putting a lot of pressure. And those pressures are around budgets and margins. They're getting tighter and tighter. And, how we all want to try to fix that is increasing our patient volumes and increasing our patient targets. And, as you're trying to build your volumes, that just puts a lot more pressure on your quality metrics and patient experience scores and, those things. And so I think the biggest challenge is the number of competing priorities. And you can't say, oh, well, I just have to prioritize because you can't
Yeah.
right now. There's just so many, and they're all important because, they're all a huge cog in that wheel, if you will. And if you lose one of those, the whole strategy is broken. And so I think it's just been really tough as a CNO, trying to keep that prioritization, especially when we're dealing with things like, the amount of bedside turnover that we have, where, we're not keeping nurses at the bedside for 10, 12, 15 years anymore. We're also seeing that turnover in our nurse leaders. And so, when you think about kind of that one true north, that has to be your CNO and your CNE. And so communications are exceedingly critical. And you have to be very thoughtful about what you put out there because they can be, obviously interpreted different ways. So you have to be very intentional about that. You've got, all these pressures around meeting the benchmarks and exceeding the benchmarks. And, how do you do that with younger staff that don't have as much experience, with young leaders that don't have as much experience, and trying to build those bridges between those so that you don't lose, your quality and your safety and your experience things. I think that's the biggest thing right now is just that everything is an important priority. And so being able to pull it out and say, I'm going to invest my time on this and solve this one first, you really just can't do that. You're moving from one high priority to the next high priority to the next, and it's quick, and you've got to be nimble, and you've got to be able to execute quickly on the first time. So that's kind of how I'm feeling lately.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it seems like it's a very delicate balance and like there's no perfect place to start, like you're
Mhm.
saying.
Yeah.
So I imagine that's difficult. And speaking of, newer generations of nurses and tightening budgets, what are your thoughts on sustainable strategies for recruiting and retaining the next generation of nurses as things keep shifting in healthcare so much?
Yeah, I think this is, so powerful. And I don't know that any of us have found kind of that magic key to open that door yet. We all
Mhm.
talk a lot about it, and we know foundationally what the important things are, right? And empower and engage our nurses to have input into their practice. Making sure that we're keeping them safe when they're here working with us. And I mean, we know all those make it basic things for sure, but I think it has been so interesting. I love the Gen Z population. I'm so grateful to them, right? I'm a Gen Xer, and I was between the baby boomers who were so loyal and, and we're just so grateful for those things, and, worked every time you'd say, can you work an overtime shift? It was yes. And, and then just the shift between where, that generation was when I came in to nursing to where the Gen Zs are now. I love that they prioritize their wellness. I love that they prioritize, that there's more to life than just work. And, but does that offer us challenges as healthcare? You bet, you betcha.
Mhm.
And, I think, I hear a lot of people talk about this. I haven't found an organization that has successfully done this. So if there's any out there, please, I would love to talk to you.
Mhm.
But kind of creating that a la carte model, because it's so true. I mean, things have shifted, and, the Gen Zs, when they come in, they're looking to get student loan debt paid off right away, and they're looking to have a higher wage and maybe not so much of the benefits. And, I would love to be able for Rush to be able to get to a model like that. And, and that sounds amazing. That sounds wonderful, but wow, is that difficult to operationalize? And so, I really think we've got a long way to go here yet. I wish I had the key to open that door, but I really don't. Other than, I think we definitely have to stick to the basics, and, make it a great place to work where nurses, when they are here, they feel good when they're here, and they're really driving towards that worthwhile and purposeful work. I think those are important, critical things that we all need to do, and some do that better than others, which probably is what sets us apart. But I really do think we've got to start thinking more broadly about system approaches and system initiatives to help us achieve those things.
Mhm. Absolutely. And as a member of Gen Z, you're spot on with the values changing and kind of, with that in mind, how do you think CNOs can incorporate succession planning into their workforce strategies? Because as we're saying, expectations have changed and career paths have changed. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think one of my colleagues, Dr. Rose Sherman, she has this blog that she publishes, and I know a lot of leaders ascribe to her to her readings and whatnot. But she was talking about how we as leaders, we've got to shift our mindset. We can't keep asking in the interview question, well, where are you going to be here in 5 years? Are you going to be here in 10? Instead, we need to make the time that those nurses are here with us. We need to make that valuable for them and valuable for us. And,
Mhm.
and so I really do like what some of the organizations are doing, where they're putting in those career coaches that are built within the nursing team, not through the HR, but in the nursing team. And they're linked with HR as a partnership. But, they meet with those, with the new hires and the first couple of weeks that they're here, and they start building out that process of, where do you want to be in 5 years? Let me help you build that, through your career here at Rush. We have so much opportunity. We're a big system. We're a large academic medical center. We have all that you need here within our system. So let us help you do that and build yourself, to be where you want to go. I love that idea. We have that. I know I'm only 3 months in here at Rush, but that is definitely on our strategic. We're getting ready to build our strategic plan and for nursing, and that's definitely one of the things that we're going to be looking at and adding, and figuring out how we can do that. I think and I've heard other organizations say that has been a huge success for them. So I'm excited to get that built here at Rush and drive that.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that makes sense with like first year turnover rates and everything. And it's almost more valuable to ask, like, what do you want to do while you're here right now? And how can we help you get there? And then that hopefully will incentivize people to stay longer. Um, Absolutely. So speaking of things changing, on the technology front, where do you think AI will fit into nursing workflows at the bedside and beyond?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. I think our all of our EHR partners, so the electronic health record partners that we have, Cerner, Epic, all of those, I think they're heading down the right paths. What we need when you think about the life of a staff nurse, and especially what we just talked about how the tenure at the bedside is just continuing to decrease. We're going to have to lean into AI to help us to point out to our clinical nurses what's important right now on this patient. What
Mhm.
are we seeing in all that is documented here, and with all the knowledge that we have through AI? What do we want to pull forward to that clinical nurse and say, hey, you need to check this. Hey, you need to think about this. Hey, have you connected these two dots? And so I really think we're just scratching the surface right now with that, but I think there's so much opportunity. I see the things that we already have now, where we have the deterioration index and we have, a lot of the false predictability and, all of those different things. I think it's going to be so critical for us in nursing as again we have younger and younger less experienced nurses working at the patient's bedside. We have to find ways, and I think the best way to do that is to lean into technology. We've got to find ways to put this in front of the nurse, then let them focus their clinical judgments on the small amount of, hey, have you thought about this piece of information? Let them use their clinical judgment all in on that instead of being overwhelmed and distracted by everything that is, documented on every patient when they're here. And so I really do think those things are going to help us to improve our quality metrics despite having, the less tenured nurses at the bedside. And I'm excited for that. And, I know here at Rush, we're probably a little further behind than what some of the other organizations are. We're just getting to deploying virtual nursing. We're just
Mhm.
starting, the conversations about ambient listening and so I'm excited to help take the organization into those areas. But it will definitely be something that I'll be leaning into with our IT partners and our nursing informaticists to help get the best that we can out of that. But I'm so excited for that.
Mhm. Absolutely. And then you mentioned this a little bit earlier in our conversation, but how do you think recent changes to national policy are impacting the nursing workforce and the financial well-being of hospitals?
Yeah. I think what we're, seeing a lot of where I've seen the biggest impact has been, in places like our emergency departments has really seen a lot of this, and I think some of the healthcare policies are creating, a greater need in those social determinants of health, right? We've always had people that come into our emergency rooms because they need to get warmed up or they just need a meal or, things like that. I think that is growing. And so I think that that's definitely one piece. I think now more than ever, the social determinants of health work is so critical for organizations, and nursing leads that work, right? Nursing has always looked at those things. That's just always been a foundation of nursing. I remember learning that in nursing school 35 years ago. We just didn't call it social determinants of health. But that holistic view, and I think now more than ever, that's going to be so critical for our nursing workforce to stay focused on. And that's hard right now when you have
Mhm.
those less experienced nurses that are so task based, getting them to think more holistically. I need to, and my leadership team needs to help them understand why that's important and why that's critical. And I do believe that, some of the changes that we're seeing at state level, at federal level, it's going to continue to drive the importance of nursing in that healthcare team because of those things. And so, that's kind of where I see it. Obviously, again, some of the things we've talked about, just the financial pressures are just
Yeah.
huge. And, we see the declining margins in the majority of our healthcare. And so those things are very real. nursing's going to have to adapt to that. And that's where the innovation for us is going to be so critical. How do we get the same work done differently? And that's through technology, that's through different care models, that's through, again, approaching things and with a different holistic view to make sure we're capturing it all the first time. And so I think those are things that I'm kind of paying attention to and seeing with that.
Hmm. Absolutely. And you're 100% right. It's all about adapting and not the first time nursing has had to adapt to some major global changes. So
For sure.
absolutely. So to pivot back to you personally, what are you most proud of?
Jeep, one of the things that I'm always excited to talk about, and I love, talking with the staff about this, I still practice at the bedside. Most recently, I just moved obviously to Chicago in the last couple of months, so I haven't been working for the last several months in this role. But I held a inpatient hospice staff nurse position for a while, and so I think just being able to say, yeah, I'm a chief nursing executive, but hey, guess what? I can still roll up my sleeves and I can still take care of a patient and still document it all and do all of that. And, I think that's so hard though. I mean, because our jobs are so rough. I'll readily admit, as
Mhm.
I'm getting older, it's harder and harder to do that, to pick up a Saturday shift or a Sunday shift. But when I do that, I dread it the whole weekend. But then once I'm there, I'm like, this is so great. I love being able to do this and I'm good. But I think that that's the thing that I still like, that I can still connect on that level and still be able to do those things.
Mhm. Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I feel like I don't hear that very often. So that's really cool that you're still able to do that. Um, so my last question for you is, do you have any advice for CNOs or CNEs?
Yeah, I think in summary, it's a lot of the things that we talked about. I think, we've got to lean into technology. We've got to be innovative. We've got to keep asking the question, why do we do it this way? And find
Mhm.
different ways. Adaptability is key to our success. And I think the other thing that I would say is, wellness. If I'm not well, if I'm not taking good care of myself, if I'm not, in a place where my cup is full, I can't go out and help fill their cups. And I think that that's all things. And probably that last one is the hardest thing, right? We're
Mhm.
nurses, we're leaders, and it's hard for us to prioritize our own health, but that's where I think we need to lean into our Gen Z partners and learn from them, because I know I'm not always good at that, but it's something I'm definitely prioritizing now. And I think that that has actually made me a better leader. So those would be my things that I would say I would recommend.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dina, for your time. It's great to see you again, and congratulations. And thank you for sharing your insights. And thank you so much to everyone in our audience for listening. Thank you, Dina.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Take care, everyone.